Everyone, my name is Mikkel and I'm the host of today's Quadrant webinar on the topic of segmentation and targeting. So I'm going to share a few cases, a little bit of a theoretical primer as well, but really try to present a holistic view on this very important topic. So let's get to the slides and get going. And again, this webinar is built for B2B companies, so there's other implications for business to consumer companies that we won't cover today. Yes, again, my name is Mikkel. I'm a partner here at Quadrant, and I'll be hosting the webinar. The basic agenda for today is the first topic is we're just briefly gonna cover why we at least see a lot of segmentation exercises that actually fail to deliver results, why everyone understands the importance of segmentation. Actually, a lot of segmentation exercises fails to deliver the desired outcomes. Then we will cover different types of segmentation and how they map against different use cases within the company. And then we'll show you a couple of examples on practical segmentation exercises that has yielded business results. And then finally, of course, a little bit of key takeaways from today's session. It's going to run for about 45 minutes, and it's also going to include a Q&A session in the end. Before we get started, just for some of you people that maybe don't know us, yes, Quadrant Consulting is a Danish-based but European sort of operating consulting company within the commercial space. Yeah, we are a little bit more than 25 people based here in Copenhagen, and we love to write about all things commercial excellence, sales, marketing, and commercial strategy. And on top of that, of course, we do a lot of work for different types of clients, mostly B2B companies from scale up to global enterprises. And a lot of the services we offer are sort of bucketed into three major sort of buckets. The first one is of course supporting companies on strategic decisions around go-to-market strategy, organizational design, due diligence, and the likes. And we also spend a lot of our time developing organizations, whether it's developing and implementing the right tools, ways of working, operating model, and building capabilities. And then, of course, we're also supporting companies on high-impact commercial accelerations programs, whether it's about closing new big customers or servicing customers even better or driving new leads and the like. So decide, develop, and accelerate in a pretty sort of simple manner frames what we do here at Quadrant. And today we're going to cover the topic of segmentation, targeting, and also resource allocation, and that's one of the key topics that we also work with a lot of our clients. So I'm looking very much forward to covering this topic. And why is this actually important, right? There's a lot of talk about segmentation, and I think we've all taught in school that of course we need to work with segmentation and choose which segments to target and the likes. And that's all jolly, but I think it requires a little bit more thinking that in the sense that doing this exercise and being firm about how we segment the market and where we want to play, it actually yields a lot of value for different types or different parts of the company. In the sales and channel management piece of the commercial demand chain, of course, we can do much more targeted outreach if we are much more firm in our segmentation. It's a lot easier for us to also qualify deals, right? Are the sort of deal inflow, the right types of companies that we're attracting, and the likes. And the same goes with choosing ecosystem partners, right? For marketing, it allows us to create much more personalized, targeted campaigns, and of course, optimize the marketing spend, making sure that we get the most bang for the buck. But also for product, right? Making sure that we're developing products that align to the needs of the target segments that we're going after, right? Making sure that we are testing the user experience of our products against the right types of segments and the likes. But also on the support piece, all the way to servicing customers in a proper way, making sure that we allocate resources in the support chain against high-value segments and the likes. And this is just sort of a brief write-up. The key point here is there is a lot of value across the demand chain in succeeding with proper segmentation and targeting. That being said, right, while most segmentation, let's call it projects, have a really profound starting point, right? We want to be more focused, we want to be more targeted, we want to be sort of lead with insights and the like. And we want to get to an outcome where we have a real thorough understanding of all the segments and where we play, what's behind those segments, and provide guidance to the commercial organization on how to act on those segments, right? That's always the ambition for segmentation projects. That being said, I think our humble experience is that a lot of segmentation projects fails to deliver on this ambition. And it's not because the product necessarily is wrong. It might just be that they are not necessarily super meaningful for the business, right? And I think we've all seen these lengthy reports with these extensive segment descriptions, right? Are they really, really super meaningful for the business? Do they map onto the business and how we operate as a company, right? A second topic, super important, is of course how actionable are they, right? And actionability is about the actual people in the demand chain that needs to do a certain thing with these segments, right? To what extent can we act on them, right? And then finally, they are rarely updated, right? The segmentation exercises may be treated as a sort of one-off project, which might be super meaningful to do as an outset, but then we fail to revisit those segments and update them in a dynamic manner, and at some point they would be outdated, right? So lack of meaning for the business, lack of actionability, and lack of updatability are usually some of the things that are hampering the sort of the success of a typical segmentation exercise. So we want to try to address some of these topics in today's session. Segmentation, what is it actually, and why do we need it? Well, at the core, segmentation is about looking at a typically unorganized data set, applying some sort of segmentation logic to that data set, right? And then finally splitting up those subsegments into what we call action groups, which allows us to guide actions, right? And the first two parts are typically sort of well understood. We have some data, we slice and cut that data and put people into or companies or whatever we're looking at into different subsets. But the final part here is one of the key things that are often missing, where we also are very sort of deliberate about what type of action and how do we act and operationalize these segments. And in our sort of core belief, this should be an ingrained part of all segmentation exercises that we carefully consider. How do we actually guide action, and how do we act on these segments that are sort of churned out of the segmentation model? So for us, this is the three sort of most high-level building blocks of a proper segmentation model. That being said, segmentation, at least in a B2B context, is sort of looking at and working with a lot of sort of global B2B companies. Segmentation is situational in the sense that there is no segmentation model to rule them all, right? A lot of the companies we work with both have a sort of use case around company strategy. How do we see the market? In the most crudest form, where do we play, right? Is there certain high-level segments where we don't play at all? Also need to build products, right? And you're building products towards certain segments. And so how do you put together your roadmap and your product vision? In the same sense, you also have a sort of annual, typically marketing and sales planning exercise, right? What are some of the more mid to short-term priorities, and where do we invest in terms of getting the most bang for the buck on the resources that we're deploying? But all the way down to marketing campaigns, product launches, account and territory management, right? Where it's all about understanding which customers do we visit, when, and what do we then do in terms of addressing whatever customer needs to be facing. So yes, segmentation is an important discipline, but in many ways it's actually a capability that we deploy in different parts of the business and in different work modes, so to say. And linked to the prior sort of point is also the fact that segmentation can actually be many things, and it's quite an interesting observation speaking to commercial leaders when you ask about what is segmentation actually to you. And of course, it's mostly shaped based on the sort of immediate need of that function that they work with. So if you ask a sales leader, segmentation might be one thing. Ask a marketing leader, it might be something entirely else. If you ask a CEO, completely the other option. So just trying to sort of clean up this space a little bit, we typically see 4 types of segmentations that are relevant in the context of B2B companies. The first one is what we call strategic segmentation, classical sort of market game board decisions, where do we play in terms of which segments, and how do we then respond with whatever product we have on the shelves. Then there's sort of more value-based segmentation, right, where we define customer segments with different needs and pains and drivers in order for us to tailor and communicate more specific value propositions. Then there's also, where we get even more granular, is what we call account segmentation, right, where we're helping salespeople allocate the right resource to different types of account, and we might look at potential or size or whatnot. But it's really about understanding how salespeople can deploy resources in the most efficient manner. All the way down to what we call micro segmentation, right? Super automated live segmentation of individual stakeholders or individual accounts, right? Typically based on some sort of digital behavior and typically automated. All of these 4 use cases are actually segmentation, right? So when you're asking yourself, what is our segmentation model, or we need to do a segmentation exercise, it's quite crucial to understand what are we trying to achieve, because a lot of the practicalities around the segmentation model really depends on the use case behind the whole exercise. Another key point of segmentation is to understand how do we actually get to a proper segmentation model. And what we're seeing is the typically 2 approaches, called top-down and bottom-up. The top-down approach is where you sort of a priori you define some sort of logic based on what you know or what you're experiencing in the field, and then you're sort of applying that logic to an uncoordinated data set, right? It might be that the key sort of narrative in the company is that different verticals have very different needs, and the go-to-market strategies need to be different for each of these verticals. So what you do is you take that lens and then you apply it on a set of uncoordinated data, and then you have the segmentation model and your underlying segments produced based on that process. Another approach is bottom-up, where you look sort of completely explorative at an uncoordinated set of data, but with no sort of prior hypothesis about what logic do we want to apply. And then you run some sort of statistical analysis. It can be a cluster analysis or the likes, where the statistical sort of engine will provide the logic based on how much sort of consistency there is within the segments and differences between the segments. So it's basically a statistical exercise with no prior observation about what could be the logic. And actually, to be frank, most exercises has a bit of both of them, depending on the process, and there's no sort of right or wrong when it comes to which process to apply. But running both exercises can be quite, I think, at least in my experience, informative. So before we start to share some practical examples of B2B segmentation and targeting work, I just want to share some of the learnings that we've made throughout the years working with a lot of B2B companies on segmentation and targeting. The first one is, let's say, one size fits none, right? And it's coming back to one of the prior points. Segmentation can be so many things, right? And there's a lot of devil in the details when we talk about segmentation model. So the very first sort of foundational thing you need to look at is to clearly understand which use case are we tapping into, enabled by a segmentation model, not the other way around, where we're building a segmentation model and then we go looking for use cases. Clear understanding of which use cases do we have, and hence do we need one segmentation model for that use case and another segmentation model for another use case. So always create this map of use cases and requirements to the segmentation models, because that will allow you to understand whether you are actually solving the actual need, or you're just producing a solution that is going for a problem, so to say. So one size fits none. And then again, another point which has, at least also in my experience, been a pretty healthy exercise to run prior to going too deep into the weeds in terms of data, is to build what we call capability visions for the segmentation model. So again, linked to the use case, really go deep on what should this segmentation model do for whom, and what should be the output, right? And that why, quote unquote, behind the segmentation model should really guide everything that follows and flows from that, right? The why should inform of course, the how. So how do we actually create the solution? What is the data availability? What is feasible, to be frank, which is also typically a question that becomes quite apparent in a lot of these exercises. And then finally, building the what of the solution. But start from why to how to what, not the other way around, and getting into the weeds of building the solution without a clear vision of why we're doing it and what the capability vision is behind the segmentation model. Another key point, and this is maybe a bit of a hobby horse at Quadrant here, is also not to go too deep, I would say, on precision, because what typically happens if you want a very sophisticated model is that there's a negative correlation between, let's call it, perfection and usability. So the more complexity, the more perfect the model is, the higher the risk there is that it's difficult to apply for the people that actually work with the model. And that simple dichotomy between building a model, using a model, needs to be carefully considered. And typically, it requires a little bit of trade-off, maybe, between, let's all call it, precision and complexity versus functionality, right? So don't try to strive for precision. Create models that are functional, but also super practical to use. If they aren't used, they don't carry a lot of value, even though it looks super sophisticated and the likes. So keep balancing these two things in a proper way to make sure that the models are actually picked up by the organization. And then number 4, and this is, I would say, related to the prior point, but the most important thing is to make sure that the segmentation model is clearly embedded in the way kind of sales, marketing, commercial leaders and the likes operate. So do you have a fixed operating model that allows you to put this segmentation to work? It might be that it needs to work at a sort of time box set frequency, right? Is there a monthly review whether we are managing to recruit the target customers that we want to recruit or the likes? Is it more situational, right? Triggered by is this, then that, right? That's a much more situational one. Or is it more of an always on track, right? Fully automated. It might be that if you're running automated marketing campaigns or email programs or whatnot, where the segmentation model is really put to use through digital media or trigger-based communication, it's much more of an always on track. But the key here is to understand that, and this list can go on and on, the key list is to understand, yes, we're building a model, but how do we actually hardwire that model into how we work and put it to use in our daily work, right? Again, we want to avoid some of the key points from the initial part of this presentation, that we do this fancy report, and it was super interesting, and we all learned a lot, at least the people working on the project. Fancy report, but the report goes to the shelves. The people that built that report maybe go on to other jobs, completely forgot about the work, and you could argue that work is actually completely wasted, right? We want to avoid that, and a key point here is to integrate the segmentation model in the way we work. And then finally, and this is also a bit of a hobby horse here in Quadrant. We work with a lot of different organizations, right? We work with product organizations on launching product, ensuring proper product training, but also commercial excellence functions, sales, marketing teams, and the like. And we sometimes get the luxury of getting that cross-functional view on how they see the market, for example, right? And it's often quite evident that there's no sort of alignment in terms of how they see, segment, and target the market. So to the extent possible, aim to ensure alignment across the different functions to avoid these inconsistencies and, to be frank, also negative customer experiences, because it might be that we have some let's call them invest to win segments where we really want to put a lot of effort and provide a bit of a white glove experience, right? But maybe that message was never brought into the sales, the support team, and they give these people that are super important to our business, or these companies that are super important to our business, they give them sort of the same sort of quote unquote bland service as all other So it's, yes, of course, it's less efficient if we aren't aligned, but it can also potentially hamper the customer experience. So marketing and sales, different opinions, yes, but try to mitigate that by using this exercise to bring people, to sort of join people around a common idea of how to view the market and how to segment and how to target. Cool. So that's a little bit of a primer on what is segmentation, what are some of the pitfalls and some of the key learnings we've done through some of the work. But I also want to share a couple of examples of segmentation work that we've done together with some of the fantastic clients we have in this shop. The first one is what we call strategic market segmentation, right? And this is the first use case, typically sort of a typical where to play decision, right? Where should we invest to win, and which segment should we keep in mind building our product? And this work was done together with a leading Nordic challenger bank. Before I go into the actual solution, I just want to practically show the process that we actually went through with this challenger bank, but this applies to a lot of other can be applied to a lot of other companies as well. When it comes to market segmentation, right? This is the big topic, right? On the left side of the spectrum of use cases we saw earlier, right? Where do we play? We see 5 phases that companies need to go through. The first one is to create a map of the market. And this sounds weird, right? But simply creating those axes that we know will define the market is a very, very sort of important foundational exercise, because that lens will shape and form all the segments that follows from that. So taking that exercise in a serious way, right? How do we create a proper market map that allows us to work with segmentation, right? And again, it's about what's meaningful to our business, what is actionable for us, right? And there's no one size fits all. It should be built on what's meaningful to the company in question. And there's a couple of exercises you can do around it. You can look at different parameters, rate and review those parameters. This is not about choosing segments or defining segments. It's just creating the actual map of the market. So that's an exercise in its own right. Then based on that map, we need to populate that map with segments, right? That's a bit of an analytical exercise where you start to cluster segments to ensure that you have some segments that are distinct, right? Homogeneous within the segment, but also different from the other segments. You need to understand to what extent do I pool different segments together and the like. So again, a statistical exercise, but also a bit of an exploratory exercise, because they also need to be actionable. And one of the key pitfalls that at least I've seen here is to create 15 to 17 segments, because these segments are all statistically significant. Yes, but they are not actionable. That's the challenge. So typically the 3 to 6 segments or the likes would be enough, right? Because we need to be able to act on those segments. And still, we haven't chosen which segments to go after. This is simply about creating a map of the market and creating segments within that map of the market. And then finally, taking out those segments of that map and then creating, doing a little bit of an analytical exercise where you assess, it could be 2 dimensions. One is how attractive is the segments, right? It can be everything from size, willingness to pay, future growth, share, and how much money they have, or whatever dimension and parameters that are meaningful to your business. How attractive is the segment? But attractiveness alone is not enough. We also need to be able to assess to what extent or to what sort of probability or likeliness is it that we're going to win that segment, right? So there's a lot of segments that are extremely attractive in the car market, but that doesn't mean that Skoda, for example, can win all of them, right? So we need to connect attractiveness and ability to win. And ability to win is really about how good a fit is this segment in question with our sort of value proposition. Do they value the things that we do well? Capability fit. Is there some practical things in our product that makes us a good fit for certain segments or disqualifies other segments, right? In the car space, right? How fast is the car and the likes, right? And again, this is about understanding how good a fit our company is with a given segment. In the software domain, it can be everything from integration needs as well, and other things, right? So attractiveness, ability to win. So you take out the segments from your market game board and then assess those segments based on those two new dimensions. And you can create a very sophisticated breakdown of those dimensions, assign weight to different sub-parameters and the likes, or a much more simpler version, all good. But it's typically a very sort of productive exercise, separating exercise number 2 from creating the segments, from number 3, analyzing which segments to go after, right? And this also allows you to maybe cluster the segments in 3 or 4 different buckets. Here we have a sort of invest to win. Then you maybe have some harvest segments where you don't necessarily actively want to deprioritize or reject them, but you don't want to invest your go-to-market efforts. You don't want to build your product towards these segments. And then finally, you might even have a deprioritize segments, or segments you actually don't want in your small shop or big shop, whatever. So clustering those segments according to whatever buckets you define here is also part of this exercise. And then finally, adding a bit of depth to each of these segments. One thing is having sort of a segment name and description. Another thing is adding a layer of depth to these segments. Again, this is all about making them actionable, making them meaningful for your colleagues working in the different go-to-market parts of the organization, right? So this can be outlining everything from use cases, pains, jobs to be done, typical questions, firmographics, whatever you believe is meaningful for your company, but adding depth to each segment that allows new people coming into your organization to be onboarded and really bring these segments to life. If you're writing a landing page, creating an outreach email or whatever, right? That core content is needed to bring those segments to life. And then a lot of segmentation exercises actually stop here. And this is a really good outset, to be frank, for next segmentation exercise. I think to go to the A+ version, I would add a 5th layer, which is about what I call anchor and update. Anchor and update is 2 things. Let's call it the anchor piece is, of course, getting back to the whole idea of embedding it firmly in how we work, embedding it in CRM system, embedding in media channels, embedding it in workflows. All the things that we do in the commercial organization, of course, needs to be done based on how we see the market. So clearly hardwiring it into our operating model. Another thing is the updatability, right? To what extent can we track whether the segmentation model is actually meaningful for us, right? Because the first part can be, yes, based on an analysis of current customers and to what extent we're winning customers today and market survey and all these things. But we need to ongoingly track whether that hypothesis, which segmentation is basically an hypothesis, still holds through. And that requires us to, in an ongoing manner, track whether we're actually recruiting companies from these different segments, whether invest to win segments carry higher value than other segments, whether the churn rate among invest to win segments are lower because it's a better fit for our customer. And if some of these metrics don't necessarily show a big difference or are not aligned to the segmentation model, we should not try to shoehorn the segmentation model into the analytics engine. We should use those data to update the segmentation model. And it might be that we will move some of the segments from invest to harvest. It might be that we'll pull some of the segments together because they're showing completely uniform behavior and don't need differentiated messaging or outreach or whatever. So implications, there can be a lot of potential implications, but the updatability and constant revisiting of the segmentation model is also a very meaningful exercise. So for this specific bank, I just want to go through some of the steps we went through together with this challenger bank. And of course, yes, the situation they want to grow, a key point of go-to-market strategy and understanding how to grow is to understand, can we broaden the appeal of our offering in terms of understanding who would actually buy into our offering and where can we win in the market. So that was the key question behind this exercise. How far up market can we go? What is the logic we use to define our segments? Where do we invest? Where do we harvest? And how do we create a model that is easy to understand, act on, and ongoingly track? The first thing we did was to look at the data, of course, and define the use case behind the model. We created a segmentation model based on 3 sort of key sources. a one-off market survey where we did an in-depth study of the market and customer needs, jobs to be done, drivers, all these things. Also looking at the internal customer data, of course, which segments are we actually good at recruiting today, right? So that's another lens. Where do we see the inflow today, right? And then finally also external data from databases, looking at size, mortality rate, and all these things of different industries. All of these data were then brought into the same model. And then that model was also firmly anchored to the analytics engine, making sure that we can actually ongoingly track whether we are recruiting the right types of customers, whether what type of churn, average revenue per user, and all these things, these different segments are showing, and whether we need to change the segmentation model at an ongoing basis. So data, building the model, and then bringing that model to life, of course, and acting on it, but also ongoingly tracking whether we're seeing value from that model. And it's not so important to talk about the actual model, but of course, each of these segments could be defined across some different parameters. I prefer to talk a little bit about the process, right? One of the first things we did was to disqualify poor fit companies, right? In this space, there are certain companies that are not really sort of aspired customers due to money laundering, risk, and all these things. So pretty quickly disqualified companies that we believe are not a good fit with our product and our values. And then go deeper in defining how we see the market. And very important, number one is really about customers that we by no means want in our shop. That's the key question that is guiding the first exercise. Second exercise is defining a map of the market, right? Evaluating different parameters on how to see the market, running statistical analysis on differences between those parameters. Also doing the bottom-up exercise, the clustering exercise, what does that yield, and the likes. And then defining some sort of logic on how to see the market. And then actually building the segmentation model on top of that. This market map would provide these segments, and then we'll take out all those segments, and then based on a model of attractiveness and ability to win, we created, I think, 8 to 10 sub-parameters that define each of these high-level parameters of attractiveness and ability to win. Each of those sub-parameters was assigned a weight, and then we scored each segment based on that, based on the performance on that specific sub-parameters. And the output was basically for each segment that they got an attractiveness score and an ability to win score, right? Based on that model. And still, we haven't chosen any segments yet. This is simply about rating each of the segments. And then finally, evaluating, of course, those segments based on the scoring, and then choosing where to invest, where to harvest, and where to potentially disregard entirely, right? Creating that map. And then finally, bringing those segments to life through in-depth descriptions. And again, we had a lot of data from some of the prior research that could really inform a much more qualitative view on each of those segments, which makes them easier for people to put to use in their daily work. And then finally, anchoring it to the analytics engine, again, making it trackable, updatable, and sort of in a live environment, track whether the segmentation model is actually yielding results. So that was the first one. So this was a typical, let's call it a commercial leadership marketing use case, right? We talked about market sort of segmentation, where to play very high level questions about where we invest, right? As a unified commercial and product organization. That's one use case, but I just want to make sure and show a completely different use case, I would say, when it comes to segmentation, and we call it dynamic micro segmentation, right? Because again, actually data-driven segmentation is not quote unquote just for marketing or commercial leaders. It yields a lot of different use cases. I want to share one from another client of ours. Company in the sort of building industry, Salesforce typically, the Salesforce typically needs to answer two fundamental questions to get the most out of its limited time, right, with account. Sales reps need to understand who should I actually allocate my limited time to? Yes, that's one question. And what should then be the focus of my interactions with those accounts that I choose to invest time in? A very simple question that all salespeople are facing every day. And going about this exercise in a wrong manner can really completely derail the performance of an organization, because they might spend time on the wrong clients, spend all the time with the friends of the house, the ones they're used to visiting, but not necessarily understanding where's the actual potential to drive business. So these two questions really guided the work on the segmentation model that is ongoing with this leader in building materials. And why is this question important? There is two sort of hurdle that needs to be passed, because a lot of reps in this company and in a lot of companies have a very sort of large portfolios of account, right? Sometimes reps have more than 500 accounts of the likes, right? So you potentially have a lot of hundreds of potential accounts, but how do I actually assess where potential is? Should I do like an analysis of each of these accounts on a monthly basis? Then that would more or less take up all your time and take a lot of time away from actually interacting with customers, which we know is where a lot of the value is generated. And another key point, operational point here, is that there's an abundance of data that could inform this quote-unquote analysis, but actually you don't have a lot of access to that data. The rep needs to go into the CRM, loyalty program databases, HubSpot databases, go visit or find the individual websites and social media channels of these companies, right? And again, just imagine the work that would need to go into it. So because, trying to break it down, this exercise alone, right, looking at how big they are, how is the business growing, right? What trajectory is the company on? Is the potential to capture business from competitors? What is our relationship strength? Is the potential to upselling and cross-selling? All these questions, imagine building and doing that every day, right? It could be that we would take, and this is just a hypothetical calculation, right or wrong, checking the CRM system, 20 minutes. Check participation in loyalty programs, 15 minutes. Check databases, 15. Participation in marketing campaigns, 10, on and on and on we go. Easily spend 1.5 hours per account. And maybe you do this on a quarterly basis, maybe you do it on a half-yearly basis, maybe you do it on a yearly basis. Nevertheless, easily spend 1.5 hours per account. And if you have 600 accounts in 1 year, you do this once a year, well, that's basically 112 full work days, right? So half of the time is spent on doing proper account research and mapping these accounts against some of these key parameters. And that's a major drain. And again, it's a key imperative for a lot of sales leaders to make sure sales reps are investing their time in actually meeting customers and delivering value to customers. So this is, of course, a key problem. So what we did is, together with this client, to build a much more dynamic model where we use account data from sort of various sources, and then we actually create what we call a segmentation service. So it's a dynamic, ongoing service that analyzes each account based on these parameters, based on the data that is fed into this model, and then provide guidance in terms of what to do for the sales rep, right? And again, what could the data be? It can be annual revenue, number of products bought this year, right? So a lot of this stuff coming out of the ERP system, premium products bought this year, 3-year revenue growth, right? Share of wallet, number of employees, and the likes. All those data fed into this segmentation model, or segmentation service, we call it, because it's also providing a lot of guidance in terms of action, and then helping the reps in an automated manner answer 2 questions. Who should I allocate my time to? What should be the focus of my interaction? And the beautiful thing is that you can look at the 5 parameters on the left and provide a sort of a scoring for each account, of course, right? And then also provide guidance in terms of how to drive the relationship with that account, right? Do you want to leave the account entirely alone based on whatever they're scoring? Or do you, to the far right, make sure that you have +4 physical sales visits to a much more sort of virtual, a little bit more light engagement model, maybe mixed up with a bit of face-to-face meetings. And again, these buckets of interactions or engagement models are not fixed, but it's more about understanding that time is scarce, right? So we want to deploy and use that time in a proper way. And we acknowledge the fact that a virtual meeting is a little bit more easy on resources compared to physical visits. And we're also acknowledging that maybe it's not all accounts that actually need a physical visit, right? So defining an engagement model and then mapping those different engagement models against different, based on the potential of the client is really what we're trying to do. And what is the output of building a segmentation service like this? Because you could look at two different accounts. At the face of it, they look entirely similar. Same size, long-standing clients of ours, right? Same industry, offering the same things, right? Face of it, entirely similar companies. But then when you start to apply, quote unquote, the segmentation service to those different companies, what you start to get is a bit of more of a nuanced picture, right? And this segmentation service is built on this global framework of size, growth, loyalty, relationship strength, upsell, cross-sell potential. And then you rate each of those in an automated manner, each of these accounts based on to what extent they score high or they score low on these 5 different dimensions. And what you can see from this made-up exercise is that even though at the face of it, they look very similar, these two companies, they score quite differently in terms of how they perform across these 5 dimensions. So the output is definitely, they of course also need different engagement models. So they map up and the potential is evaluated in different ways. So what the key output here is that the guidance to rep is make sure that you invest a bit more resources in the renovate client, right, compared to PD, building, and plastics, because there's more potential upside, even though they look quite similar. Another thing I just wanna cover here as well is that a third leg to this stool is that you can even provide what we call sales plays. So a big part of this project has also been to develop sales plays. So based on the information we have on the client, the amount of the types of product they buy today, or whether they need account development, or whether they should be invited to events to strengthen relationships and the likes, you can actually also bake into this model the sort of use of sales plays, which are sort of pre-cooked recipes on how to engage the client. And it's not so much about whether you're calling up or whether you're visiting them. It's more the offering, how the dialogue would run, and what you can actually say to spark interest and mature the client on whatever parameters we aspire to mature the client on. So that's a third leg to the stool, adding these sales plays and providing even more guidance to the reps on how to engage these different accounts. So what does this type of micro-segmentation exercise actually do? At the sort of at heart of it, it transforms data to insights in many ways, right? Access directly in the CRM system, and it's getting better and better over time as we can see the model is put to use. And now we've, I think, worked with 7 or 8 different countries in this company, so rolling out this model and building an individualized model based on a global master data framework. And what we can see typically is that there's a couple of observations on how to succeed with something like this. First and foremost, the whole thing is built on data, right? The better the data, the better the outcomes, right? So what data do we have access to? Do we trust the data we're actually accessing? That data is the foundation, because that's what we're using to build everything downstream from that piece. Better data leads to better segmentation models, and a better segmentation and visit allocation service, of course, also provides better recommendations to the reps, right? That's the output of the actual model, providing recommendations to the reps on who to visit and what to do. So that guidance captured in the CRM system, providing guidance to the individual reps, mean that if it's done based on proper data and proper recommendation, they will also have better visits, so to say, right? So they can see that the model is actually generating returns. They can see that they meet quota in a better way. So they see that clear impact, right? So it all starts with data. Data provides better recommendations. Better recommendations provides better visits, and off we go. A positive loop is started. But what's important here to say is there's a clear sort of line of sight from data to model to application to execution to feedback, and that's a key point of this whole presentation. So before we go into questioning mode, I just want to provide a few key takeaways here. We all agree segmentation extremely important, super valuable. I think that's pretty evident. That being said, before you get going on segmentation and you want to yield whatever value you potentially can see in this important discipline, it's not really one thing. And especially, I would say, in global B2B companies, be pretty keen on what is the use case behind what we're trying to assess. What is the capability vision, meaning what should it do for whom? Be pretty firm on that before you start to build the model, put the model to use, and of course, and the likes. Focus on utility first, and then what I would call possibility second. Utility is what is sort of the minimal viable segmentation model we need? How do we get value from it? What is required to put this model to work in the way we work in the systems? How to make sure the organization understands and absorbs the information that is baked into the model. And then possibility seconds. Yes, we can do all these sophisticated things, but again, if it isn't used, it's a bit of a wasted effort. Huh? Fourth topic, poor data quality. Yeah, garbage in, garbage out. And I know that's super mundane, but be super keen on what is actually the data that we are feeding into the model, because everything that happens downstream from that will be sort of depending on proper data. So make sure you have proper data. And then emphasis on usability. Make it easy to use, make it easy to be found, make it updated, act on, spice it up with a little bit of creative work if you need to bring it to life, right? The usability and adoption piece is equally as important as building the actual model, which usually takes that gets the most emphasis, right? And then again, try to the extent possible, make it dynamic and updatable. And it's not always practically doable, but if you have a dynamic segmentation model that is baked in the CRM, you get a feedback loop between the model and what actually happens in terms of recruitment, how the model is put to use. That is definitely our recommendation, to try to establish that feedback loop. Sometimes it's not possible, but aim to put it to work like that. So yes, that was actually it for me. I'm just gonna look whether there is any Q&A here on the final parts of this webinar. We have 5 minutes left. Just gonna stop sharing. So the Q&A. See. How do you go about the updatability of a segmentation model, right? Running market surveys at specific cadence give us more precise data, but tends to be costly. Business data providers often provide limited data. What are your experiences? Yes, yeah, it depends on the model in question. The question in the model in question, I think for sure running surveys way too frequent is not super meaningful, because the answers won't change a lot, to be frank. So, you know, I've seen companies run the same survey with a half year sort of increments. I think that's way too often, to be frank. So there's probably a couple of different speeds, right? Maybe the big survey where you really go deep on the core needs and the likes is an exercise you do every second year, maybe, right? Depending on the availability of the data, one of the examples you saw before had used freely available data in public available data, right? So some data is publicly available. And if you need to buy that data in some sort of frequency, of course, I think it starts with understanding how often does it actually change this data, right? And I know a lot of the data providers provide super costly but super useful data. So I would question how often does this data actually change. And then finally, maybe there's a third component to it, which is dynamic, right? What is freely available and can be fed into the segmentation model in a completely automated manner, right? It might be revenue numbers or what else, right? From these different clients. So I think there's different layers to it, and the bad answer is that it depends. But mapping out those layers and not conflating it, trying to create a survey that is done way too often, or buying the same data set again and again and again way too frequent is also, of course, a pitfall. So yes, no fixed answer to that. Which functions do you think should own the segmentation model after it has been implemented? And that's also, again, it depends. It depends on the use case, right? What are we doing here, right? It could be that, for example, if you work in a global company where there's a need to create a localized version of a segmentation model, that the global framework is and the underlying and underpinning technology is owned by a global COMEX team, for example. But it might be that the small parameters and tweaks made on the model is done by a local resource. The training, the adoption, the questions around that is also a local responsibility. So that's one use case. Another use case is big picture corporate strategy. We need to figure out where we play in the market, where there's clear decisions about where we don't play at a global level, no local nuances. That probably sits better in a strategy team. And then you have a lot of use cases also when it comes to marketing and customer insights could also be owners. So there's probably two things to it. One is which functions own it, and is the global and local application layer that requires distinct responsibilities for the global function versus a local function. So a really bad answer. Again, the answer is probably it depends. And that's maybe a key point here is, right, the answer is often it depends. And that's why I have a lot of respect for this exercise. And what we can also see is how different in nature and use segmentation projects are, also with the work we're doing with our clients. So I have a lot of respect for the exercise, but my sort of key takeaway here is to think thoroughly about what we're doing, why we're doing it, for whom we're doing it, how do we keep it updated, how do we ensure proper ongoing ownership in a proper manner. All those questions need to be part of building a segmentation model, not quote unquote just buying, let's call it a report from an external vendor, and then hoping that that report will be put to use. So that's proper change embedded into a segmentation project. Regarding segmentation, what is your experience with very behaviorally oriented segmentation? I'm not sure completely whether I understand the question. I have a bit mixed when it comes to need-based segments. So I think we're all taught in school that's like the gold standard. I have mixed experience with need-based segments. They are pretty good for product building, but they are really difficult to act on in the go-to-market engine. That's my experience, right? When you have these quite abstract depictions of need-based segments, which might be super sort of meaningful when you're just building products to a gray mass. But when you need to identify specific accounts, you need to set up some targeting parameters in your paid media channels and the likes. Some of these more abstract segments get more difficult in terms of application. So I think that's it for today. Thank you for watching. This is the first webinar in a small series of 3 webinars. Next up is my brilliant colleague Sixen, who will talk about how to prove the value of commercial development initiatives. And it's a really strong session. A lot of commercial operatives spend a lot of time running the engine, but they also want to set aside a bit of time to developing the actual engine. And Sixen is going to showcase how you build a strong case for that in order for you to set aside time and resources to get the job done. So really interesting seminar coming up. But for now, that's all for me. Feel free to reach out if you want any help or have any questions. Of course, we love to do the work around segmentation and targeting and work with the organizations on putting it to use. So yeah, we're here to help. Thank you and have a great day.